Welcome to another episode of Changing Minds, Changing Lives. My name is Julie Sowash. I'm the founder and strategic advisor for the Disability Solutions team. I'm also the CEO of the Catch-22 group and now the job board doctor. If you have not seen all of that transition, it's all out there on the LinkedIn's, and we talked about it at length with Grant Harris, who was our last and just fantastic guest who talked to us about his experiences as an adult who is diagnosed in autism, who's also in the talent acquisition and workforce development and optimization space. Such a raw conversation, and helped me, honestly, on a day that I needed it, to hear the power in my neurodiversity, the power in my mental health disabilities. And so I just want to encourage you guys, go back, listen to Grant, check out some of our other episodes from late last year. Also very excited about some upcoming episodes. Holly O'Hearn is going to come back and we're going to talk about grieving in the workplace. We have Caden McElwin, who's going to be joining us, who I am very pumped to talk to and think will be quite a feisty conversation between us. But for today, I'm also very, very excited and very thankful that Ron Fish has agreed to join us on the Changing Minds, Changing Lives podcast to have a conversation from his perspective as a global talent acquisition leader who's also passionate about inclusive hiring, inclusive workplaces, and how to get there from a leadership perspective. And I would welcome you, Ron. Thanks for coming to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. I really appreciate. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And then just to highlight, so I am a global talent acquisition leader. I head up talent acquisition for a software company based in Utah. And that's my day job. My other job is that I also operate as a ambassador for disability inclusion, championing accessibility initiatives. And my larger goal, I guess, today is to really do more outreach in the HR and talent acquisition ecosystem to sort of suck my colleagues out there into focusing on accessible hiring processes, building equity within hiring programs as well.
That is amazing. And just, when Ashley suggested you as a guest for the show, one thing that we were very excited about is that you are a TA leader. You the title says it all, right? Global talent acquisition. And you have such a unique position, I think, in our world right now to be able to influence other TA leaders because you've done the work. You understand scale. You understand how do we look at technology as both a opportunity and a barrier to employment. And as we move into a world where AI is going to be a critical part of talent acquisition and hiring processes, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm sure we can talk a lot about that. Understanding what it means to actually implement hiring is a huge value proposition. So I thank you for joining us. I guess the first question is, and I hope you don't mind it. I hope this isn't too personal, but how did you come to care about accessibility, disability inclusion as part of not just your day job, but your second job as well?
Yeah, and that's really a foundation to, what I do today. And I'm more than happy to talk about that topic. So I have a number of people in my family with disabilities. I grew up my whole life with my father being blind, watched him struggle, navigate an inaccessible world, help him, be an accommodation for him in some regards, but then also see him achieve some really great things. Then a lot of neurodivergence in my immediate family, wife and daughter with dyslexia, a son with ADHD, have seen them struggle, some significantly overcome those challenges to achieve success. So I would say that's the foundation for it. And then as I've encountered seeing people encounter barriers within the hiring process, it's really resonated with me. And there have been a number of different elements that have really led to me sort of going from being inspired to make this part of the hiring programs that I build, to really almost becoming obsessed with making sure that I'm looking at things from the universal design perspective and really building hiring programs that are accounting for way more than just, offering an accommodation if somebody happens to figure out how to get a hold of the right person, kind of thing.
Oh, bless you for saying that. I cannot. We have a running joke at Disability Solutions about how many accommodation lines we've called in our auditing and never gotten an answer. Gotten a voicemail that is like, "Hi, thanks for calling 67547. Leave a message," or "This mailbox is full." To have a TA leader that thinks about that up front and doesn't just think that this is a little side thing that may or may not be important, but that the true way to integrate talent with disabilities into your team, but also into your brand, is to create a truly accessible experience from the hiring perspective. Thank you for saying that. So tell me a little bit more about how then what's happening right now has sort of impacted the way that you are talking potentially or moving in this space. We're obviously in just for our listeners who might be listening to this later, we're in March of 25. We've had 11246, Executive Order 11246 revoked, which kind of took that stick away, not kind of, did take the stick away around affirmative action and hiring from an accountability perspective. Section 503 is still the law of the land. It's still a requirement, and that hasn't changed. So has any of this kind of landscape that we're living in now, has that changed your approach? And how are you moving in the space that might be a little bit different that can help our listeners understand, from your perspective as a global talent acquisition leader, how to continue to do the work in an environment that's not as conducive to the work as it was a year ago?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's on all of our minds. And I think it's been a gut check for everybody in this space when DEIB or DEIA becomes like a four-letter word, right? And suddenly we're faced with this. What I'll say is my company is committed to continue our efforts in every regard. So our focus as a company is very much on the gender diverse hiring side, dealing with gender issues in the workplace, gender parity, as well as the accessibility side. So I've had this like maybe crusade that I've been on, both from the standpoint of what I'm doing within my company, as well as the public engagement I'm doing today, and with other webinars I'm putting on and so forth. So I haven't really changed what I'm doing. I think it's important work. My company is committed as well to our initiatives. Maybe some subtle changes, some nuances. Obviously, OFCCP is not this big ogre behind every recruiter's back anymore, but why change processes that have been working? And I hope that all of the good practices that have been employed, all of the best practices that have been employed, continue to resonate with all of the hiring managers, all the talent acquisition leaders and HR leaders out there. So we don't, go back to the 70s. We continue on the path we're on, and then we wait for everything to kind of shake out. But at this point, we're committed and we're still moving forward on our side.
Yeah, I think thank you for that. And I think that's, such a good point. When I'm trying to think of the silver linings, one thing that I think is very interesting is without the stick, so without the enforcement mechanism of 503, how do we look for opportunity? And I think one thing is exactly what you said, is there are brands that have been doing this work for a long time and are going to continue to do this work because they know that it is a proper business decision for them to do so, and they see the value in it. And then we're going to see on the other side those who were performative, who did it while it was popular, who did it
Yeah.
while it was the sexy thing to do, and then walked away when times got hard. And that, for us as a community, those, our memories are not short. We are not goldfish, and we're going to recognize and keep track of who our true allies are, and how important it is that, even though there is more nuance, I agree, we have to make adjustments to the world that we live in now, that there's still that commitment, and the commitment is important. um and so let me kind of switch off of that for a little bit, and ask you about how your commitment to accessibility and inclusion has influenced some of your decisions in your talent acquisition tech stack.
Sure. And, part of my goal here is to show other talent acquisition leaders, HR leaders, how uniquely we're positioned to be able to make an impact, both for employees. We know that 75% of the global workers don't tell their employers that they have a disability. So this affects way beyond, the one that we may be aware of. So it's very important. So how do I account for it in our tech stack? We essentially offer accessibility at every stage. So we have paths for accessibility requests that are both specific to our communications when somebody applies, frequently asked questions around our hiring program. We include these opportunities, and I know that we don't have somebody not answering a phone because the primary mailbox that is used for this purpose is monitored by me. So I know for sure people are getting responses, and even to a fault. Crazy story. We had somebody that actually said they had a disability, later admitted that they didn't. They were just using the email address to try to further their candidacy. And it was a big controversial post on LinkedIn. But it was really interesting, like the flip side of it that I had never experienced before. So it was very unique. We clearly handled that in as professional a manner as possible. But we try to account for this in every way, make sure we have an accessible career site. We have done a lot of testing with web access tools, as well as leveraging individuals that use assistive technologies from the Division of Services for the Blind, and other resources to ensure that we do have accessible tech stack, we have accessible applications, and all of the other pieces there.
So you said something that I'm going to use to hopefully prove to make a point to our listeners. So you had an experience where someone, not a person with a disability, abused the system. Did you stop hiring people with disabilities after that?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, I'm more committed than ever. And I think the lesson for the individual is to say, this is not a way to skip the line for anybody. This
No.
is a way to ensure that we have equity in our process. So somebody who literally is, part of the deaf or hard of hearing community that literally can't hear on a video call wants to make sure that there's captioning available, or that they can bring their sign language interpreter with them. That's what it's about. It's not about trying to give somebody an advantage, or, make sure that people with disabilities or from other diversity categories have an advantage. It's making sure that there's equity. So that was a hard
Absolutely.
lesson I think that individual learned. I was happy to teach it. And at the end of the day, Julie, all of this stuff raises awareness, brings visibility to exactly what you and I are committed to, which is ensuring accessibility, because individuals that are not aware of it or hadn't thought about it, they haven't had their own disability or been part of a community of folks with disabilities. Sometimes they're just completely unaware. And once they are, most people are empathetic. They have empathy baked into their personal values. So you just have to trigger that and ensure that people are, moving forward in that direction, and they're aware of what's happening around them.
Yeah, I think you make two good points. One is that there is so much misperception about why these types of programs exist, that people who are not a part of a non-disabled, non-white or non-disabled white community may not understand that these are not programs, these are not laws or regulations that are driven to keep them from opportunities or to provide us with a hand up. It's really just to make the playing field level, or as level as possible. Because even sometimes, if I have to call and ask for an accommodation, that still isn't level, right? I should be able to apply through the regular process. It's just an opportunity for me to continue down the apply process. It's not a step up.
Absolutely. In fact, one of one of the watershed moments for me that took me from like knee deep, because I had people with disabilities in my family and was always sort of conscious of it in our hiring programs that I built. When I found out that at my current company that literally our career site was eliminating people with disabilities because it wasn't accessible, neither was our entire corporate website. That was a watershed moment for me where I was like, oh my, like hadn't even considered that might be the case. And when I found it out, I went on a mission to make sure that we fix that, which we've done. We've brought it to ADA compliance today. But yeah, that was really a shocking moment for me that really, again, pushed. It was almost like somebody shoved me. I had my toes in the water. Somebody shoved me in, and I'm like, I'm uniquely positioned here. I can make an impact, and I plan to. So
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And you had the other kind of takeaway that we hear a lot and from corporate leaders even still today is, well, I had a bad experience hiring a person with a disability, or I hired a person with a disability and they didn't stay forever. So that must mean I can't hire people with disabilities. And what you had was an experience where someone abused the system, and it's kind of easy to anecdotally go, well, you know what, this isn't going to work. And you stayed the course because you understand that one non-successful hire or one abuse from the system is not reflective of the value of the work in its entirety or reflective of the community as a whole.
absolutely, there are always going to be bad actors. I mean, I get text messages telling me that I owe money or some other scam. So there's always going to be
Oh,
somebody
yes.
that tries to find a loophole in the system, and you just have to understand that and stay on task. And that's really what we've done here.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. What about so do you have have you done work that's non-US for the disability community or talent acquisition?
Yeah, in fact, we have really stitched this thing together globally. So when I'm a global talent acquisition leader, we are disability confident, certified in the UK. We have a lot of partnerships in India as well. We've built a couple of computer labs for students at a couple of the blind schools, like the National Institute for the Blind in India. So we have definitely done a lot of work. We're also, working across like Singapore, Australia, and others. We've got partnerships with the RNIB in the UK, which is the Royal National Institute for the Blind, I believe, is the expanded acronym. But we've got a partnership with them. We're working to get them to certify our website. Certainly the ADA seems convinced, so we're trying to convince them as well. But we're enjoying a lot of partnerships globally, definitely far beyond just the U.S.
Oh, that's really fantastic, and I think something that a lot of the leaders that we talk to are very passionate about is, it's great that we're doing things in the US, but how do we figure out how to do things that are in the other countries where we, work and live as a community? How did you approach that? How did you say, okay, this is something that we're committed to as a company? Great, let's do it. Then how did you take the approach? Is it an overarching strategy and then a nation by nation implementation, or even a region by region implementation? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So it's some of a lot of things. So what I'll say is that when you're a global company that is in many countries, you don't always know what everybody else is doing. So as I became this accessibility champion, I began to be looped into things that were happening. So I can't take credit for everything the company has done. There certainly have been a lot of other people here that have been part of that. So what I learned is that our HR leader in India was promoting some of these sort of humanitarian initiatives or accessibility initiatives. So really for me, it was more about, some of that was about understanding what we're doing as a company and then elevating that to ensure that like our executive leadership was aware of all the great work we're doing, because I get everybody really interested in accessibility, disability inclusion. And then as I learned about some of the other things that we've done, we then expanded. So I can't take credit for the computer labs in India. Certainly that was our great HR leader there that saw fit to do that. But that began to help us stitch this together. The work that we've done in the UK, I've got colleagues there, a woman named Faye that's been a great advocate and ally supporting those initiatives, kind of driving things from that region perspective, as well as other locations. So I would say it's a joint effort. Some of it is just becoming aware of what we've been doing globally. But from the hiring program perspective, I definitely have been the catalyst there driving a globally accessible hiring program. So we're ensuring that we have consistent processes, universal design of our hiring program, and that we're employing those best practices globally.
Oh, and are you using different tech stacks in different countries?
No, in large part, as far as our hiring process, it's the same tech stack. So it's our applicant tracking system, accessible, application process. And then, so the individual that I mentioned earlier that pretended to have a disability but didn't was actually based in India. So that wasn't a U.S. So that was part of our global accessibility, process, I guess, that routed and funneled that to me because I want to drive that individually to make sure that we are in fact providing equity. And most importantly, when we have accommodations requested, we're ensuring that we're coaching the other hiring stakeholders, right? Like our recruiters, if needed, or we've done that, but also the individual hiring managers to say, here's what you can anticipate in the interview. And oh, by the way, this person is deaf or hard of hearing or some other disability. Why don't we do an extended interview time? Let's do 90 minutes instead of the standard 45 minutes or an hour to ensure there's plenty of time and nobody's looking at the clock or in a hurry, because communication will happen on a different cadence for that. Yeah. So it gives us that opportunity for coaching. And I kind of, keep a tight hold on it to ensure that we are able to provide equity.
So I think that's really fantastic. That one-to-one coaching is so critical when we're helping people who are not disabled to be able to understand how to comfortably engage. Because I think a lot of times the reason that we avoid situations with people who are different with us is simply because we're afraid to offend them. We're afraid to muck it up, is one of my favorite sayings. And we're just not comfortable in how we're supposed to act with someone who looks, thinks, or feels differently. So thank you for that. Would there be any like takeaways that you have from that coaching that you've done that say, if I was going to implement a large scale training about what hiring managers need to know, what would be like a couple of things that you would say, this has to be included?
By far and away, Julie, of everything I've done, I think the biggest impact has been made by just simply raising awareness. We have a global accessibility club as well. You might not be surprised to hear it was 4 or 5 people when I got involved. I didn't start it. It was started by a woman on our UX design team. It now is over 125 people that are part of that ecosystem. So it's super exciting. But I would say just raising the awareness. And again, the coaching is really more to just have a discussion. If I'm trying to walk in the door of a building and somebody runs into me, my immediate reaction is like, what are they doing? But then if I look over and see a cane and realize they're blind, immediately I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, is there any way I can help you, sort of thing. And I think most of our managers have reacted just that way, to say, thank you for letting me know this. So I wasn't, aware that this person was autistic. I'm going to absolutely let them turn off their camera if they're most comfortable, or I'm going to start. And one thing we recommend, a best practice, is start every interview with something along the lines of, is there any way I can optimize this interview experience for you today before we get started? And just simply put it out there. It might be, somebody that just says, can I refill my water glass real quick? I've been talking a lot today. Or it might be somebody who's like, hey, can we test captioning? Would you mind just talking while I test captioning? So it could be something, but it ultimately it makes a better experience for everybody. Yeah. And I think that's what accessibility does.
I love that word, optimized, right? I dislike the word accommodation because it's us giving. It's very charitable in its demeanor, at least to me. Optimize is, how do we both get most out of this? How do I figure out how that we can be most successful together? I think that's a great word. So the kind of last question I want to focus on is we go to a lot of TA tech conferences, HR tech conferences, blah. It's that time of the year, right? It is conference season. And every booth that we go to has AI splashed in big letters, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blah, blah, blah. And I'm excited about AI. Like, I'm on the train. I want to be cool. What we haven't seen roughly in the last 5 months is a conversation around ethical AI. And what I was very excited about in 23 through late 24 was that the majority of conversations that I was seeing had an ethical component to it. And so as you're thinking as a global talent acquisition leader, I need to hire smarter, I need to hire faster, I need to hire more efficiently. I won't say cheaply, but more efficiently. And you're thinking about how AI fits into your tech stack. What are some of the questions that you're asking, or some of maybe the concerns that you have when you're talking to a vendor about how AI is being implemented in the technology?
Yeah, and it's good. I'm having conversations like this pretty regularly as a talent acquisition leader to ensure that we are embracing AI. This is not unlike a lot of the evolutions we've seen in the talent acquisition space. I used to be what we would call a headhunter, back in the day, and we were proud to be headhunters. We were like the best investigators in the world. Then, this thing called the internet happened. And then came along fax machines and email and all of the other things that came along with it. So there have been a lot of evolutions, and I've told people, don't panic. This isn't the first change that's happened, and we're still here. But at the end of the day, do we need to embrace it? I firmly believe we do, because I think that there are a lot of high volume, low value tasks that can be automated. And, that'll be a big benefit. It'll give bandwidth to the recruiters and free them up to be more strategic, to have those longer, more meaningful conversations with hiring stakeholders, with candidates, and so forth. So I've had some experiences over a number of years with, what was called AI or automation, and have seen a lot of money go out the door without a lot of ROI. So the questions that I'm asking are, show me your demo. This is great. I'm seeing these technologies that bolt into your ATS that stack rank candidates. We get more candidates than ever, 300 applicants per job, and it stack ranks the candidates. Well, my question is, can we do a pilot? Is there a back out clause if this doesn't work? Because I've just been part of things that have not really been all they're cracked up to be. They're sort of half baked. So not asking the half-baked question because I don't want to insult anybody, but at the same time, a lot of my questions surround, do you have customer references that can speak to the value they've gotten out of this? Can we, do a pilot, or is there a back-out clause? Really looking at these technologies, but I'm seeing a lot of really exciting stuff that absolutely is going to, do those tasks we don't like. I mean, hopefully AI eventually will do our laundry, clean our house, and free us up to just, be on the phone with our friends and manage our personal relationships. But, seeing a lot of very, very interesting AI, we'll see if it actually can accomplish and achieve what it's said to be. Also looking at conversational AI that can do do screening at scale, screen 1,000 people, in a condensed period of time. Those things are all super exciting. Do they work? I think it's yet to be seen. Hopefully, we can get some ROI from it.
Great. So thank you so much. I'm going to put this interview just on repeat for many of our clients and prospective clients who are really committed and passionate about this work, but need to hear from other TA leaders about how it gets done at scale. As we wrap up, I always ask two questions. The first is, what is something that someone has done for you in your life that has changed your life, as personal or not personal as you want to share?
Sure. And I'll, just say, I feel like in a lot of ways, the work I'm doing is sort of from my father's legacy. He passed away in 2019. He was blind my whole life. He was blinded in a car accident when his face impacted the steering wheel. He had on glasses before they had shatterproof lenses. So from 19 on, he was blind. I would say, what has been lasting with me is watching him overcome challenges, him being the first blind student at Penn State University, graduating with a master's degree, landing a job as the director of a housing authority, later starting his own business when he was working for the Blind Association of Western New York, and they closed the doors of their file folder company, and him sort of picking that up on his back, finding funding and reopening it as Blind Industries Incorporated. So I would just summarize it by saying that watching my dad achieve things as a blind individual who has everything against them, and see him overcome it and it not be a barrier for him, or the barriers that are there, he bulldozed through them, has been inspirational for me for sure.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your dad with us today. And last question is, what is something that you would tell someone in your shoes that would help change their minds about the talent value that we bring to their workforces?
Yeah, I think, and I said it earlier, I believe talent acquisition leaders, HR leaders are uniquely positioned to be able to make an impact here. And because so many people don't disclose a disability, we have many, many more people at our organizations that could benefit from, we don't like the word accommodations per se, but benefit from accessibility requests, being able to acquire software that would be beneficial for them, if it's speech to text or a screen reader, things that don't cost a lot of money. And I think that's the big thing. Employers think, oh, hiring somebody with a disability is going to cost me a whole lot of money, when the reality is most of those things, even building talent acquisition programs with accessibility in mind, it doesn't cost any money. It's just designing from that universal design perspective. So I think one of the big myths is absolutely that this is going to cost a lot, as opposed to, it's not really costly, and it just makes a better environment for everybody at the end of the day.
Amazing. So if someone wants to connect with you, Mr. Ron Fish, how do they find you?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active out there. I'm certainly always on a campaign around accessibility to spread the word. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got some other, articles and things I've written on the topic on ERE media as well. But feel free to hit me up, send me a friend request. And I'm also always happy to connect offline, to have one-to-one discussions, to provide tips, information, and that kind of thing for anybody out there that's in a similar position to me or just wants to know more. I'm always happy to help out. So that's an open invitation to your listeners to feel free to reach out.
And I hope they will take you up on it. Ron Fish, Global Talent Acquisition Leader, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this perspective that we need to hear right now, and for doing the work that you do and carrying on your dad's legacy to make an impact that does in fact change lives.
Thanks for the opportunity, Julie. I appreciate the conversation.